a student at San Diego State University who was delivering pizzas, and there was also a student, a young African American 12-year-old that was in and among the gang systems in LA. And his mom was like, this is too dangerous because his mom and dad were from different gangs. So he was shipped to San Diego to live with his grandfather, who was career military. And of course, he gravitated towards the same systems that he was familiar with, which was gang life down here. And, didn't started cutting school and making bad choices, but his gang initiation was sort of, was by an 18-year-old, gave him a gun and said, go get this pizza, which they had given a false address to. And Tarek, who was the SDSU student, went to deliver the pizza. And with one shot, Tony killed him. What sort of compounded this event was that California had just passed a law saying that if the crime was heinous enough, that anybody of any age could be tried as an adult. And so that's what they did. And Tony was one of the first people in California, the first person in California to be tried as an adult and found guilty and was sentenced to 25 years. And he went to Fulcrum prison at the age of 14, 16, 14. It was bad. And so the father of the student that died really took a look at this, and he said, there are victims on both ends of the gun. Yes, my only son died, but this young man, because of societal white supremacy systems, was put into this position, and he forgave him within a year. It is this sort of redemption, is this sort of forgiveness story that is sort of the vehicle in which we move into the San Diego City schools, is this idea of redemption and forgiveness being so strong and so powerful, and love over hate, that it can bring these two families together that were joined by a horrific violent act, and really repair and decolonialize themselves, and also repair the relationships with one another. And Tony is out. He's part of TKF now. We team teach together. They call each other brothers and sisters, and they call him Uncle Tony. And it's a really interesting and really beautiful way that in real time that restorative justice can do amazing things. And so that's why restorative justice with particularly children and youth is so important to get started at such a young age. And let me share my screen. Oh, sharing is not turned on. I'm going to send a request. Send the request. Okay, great. Let me do this now. Okay, perfect. So, in restorative practices, can everybody see that? Can I just get a nod or stuff? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Just really quickly, and I know you did the first one with Aisha, and if, just a really quick recap of what restorative practices are, if you weren't able to make that first webinar, is restorative practices is a social justice methodology focused on meditation, reflection, communication processes that creates opportunities to learn life skills, lessons, and build communities. So we're really shifting punitive systems, right? It humanizes student behaviors, it promotes critical thinking, and offers a way to address wrongdoing and harm. And it develops cooperative behaviors, healthy relationships, and sense of belonging. So what we're really doing is we're shifting from the inherited systems, right? We've all inherited these systems, being a product in America and part of the white supremacy systems. So an incident, the traditional discipline is on the left and the restorative practices are on the right. And the incident is defined by the rule broken, right? And instead of focusing on the rule broken, what social justice, I mean, restorative practices does is define the harm to the people and the relationships that was harmed, right? Instead of just, you broke this rule, it's now, you know, you actually really hurt this person's feelings, and this is why it's important to this person. So the next traditional system is focus on what happened to establish guilt and blame. And what restorative justice does is focus on the problem solving to identify the needs, sort of, and responsibilities. What was the need behind this action? And in the heritage systems, the authorities decide the penalty, right? The administration and the police and the judges and all these things. And then in the restorative practices, all involved have a role in the resolution process, right? So it can really hinder, and there is no repair of relationships in our traditional system. And we focus on repairing social damage and healthy development. And most importantly, there's no opportunity for amends. And in restorative practices, there definitely is. So particularly with students, the act of being restorative, this is sort of a flow chart, if you will. I go in and do a 10-week session of information, of like workshops and things to help children and youth and parents sort of identify systems and feelings and where they're getting caught. So basically, the actions or incidences happen that create problems, conflict, or harm. What we're doing within like these teachable systems and restorative conflict is to think and communicate about the situation. And then next step is to respond with restorative actions, which then leads to the step of what needs to be repaired. It's basically, you know, the who, what, when, where, and why. Who was involved? Wait, what happened, right? And then we formulate a plan, and then the next one is we fix the situation. And fix is in parentheses, but we put our plan into motion, right? And you can ping pong back and forth between the situation, the fixing it, and what needs to be repaired, because all of us mess up when we make apologies even. And so, you know, there's a lot of grace in this system. And then ultimately what happens being restorative is that it deepens the relationship and, you know, giving people time to heal is really important. I put this orange star to really sort of think and communicate about the situation as one of the most important steps when doing restorative justice with youth and teenagers. And I will stop my share and come back so I can see you, because that's important. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to put it on gallery view because I don't like to look at myself, and that's disruptive. That's like, what? That's anyway. Yay, I get to see your faces. So much restorative. So much better. Okay. So the reason why I had that starred and why it's so important in that moment is that a lot of students and in these city schools that I'm meeting with are sort of like gang adjacent. They don't really understand their feelings. All they really understand is that this anger, right? And so what we really need to do in using a restorative framework is really have students understand and give them tools and vocabulary for their feelings, right? And a lot of that first initial couple of weeks is really sort of identifying and taking apart the anger, right? And I think at this part, it's important when we start doing sort of work with these children and youth is that, you know, we talk about the fight or flight. We talk about sort of the imprinted DNA in our, you know, reaction is, you know, have you seen the jump scare videos in Halloween, right? Yes. And some of them, most people run away, but those are the ones that like also throw the punches too. And that's like, you know, thousands and thousands of years of being coded into our DNA of like, run, be afraid, or fight because this is happening. And the and once they understand that it's a physiological thing, that this is really coded for them, and that they've inherited all these systems just as we have, it really gives them permission to sort of lay it down and sort of start looking at the anger, and dismantling it instead of like pushing it down. And I talk a lot about, you know, exploding and volcanoes and lots of imagery like that. And how do we not explode? The reason that I find my work so moving and so life changing, system changing, is that I've seen it work. But what we're doing, and I say this especially to the high school students, is what I'm doing here for the next however many weeks I'm with you, is I want to give you tools in order to buy you time. Time when something's coming at you, when it's an emergency situation, somebody's yelling at you, or, you know, like making fun of you or something, and all of a sudden this anger wells up. What I really want to do is have you take that breath, have you take that 2-second moment instead of just reacting in this fight or flight. You know, people are pushing our buttons on purpose, right? We're all sort of living in a dissociative place, cognitive dissonance place, right? In our nation. You know, what do you mean I have to go grocery shopping when, you know, the democracy is falling apart, right? I'm just angry all the time. But, you know, we as adults have sort of learned, hopefully, I mean, whatever, we have learned ways to navigate sort of, how do we navigate in society with this anger? And a lot of, you know, children and students, you know, they learn these techniques of stuffing down and navigating in really unhealthy ways, because they just are learning from us and how to do these things. So it really is, before they throw that punch, before you say the unforgivable, before you pull that trigger, you know, I want you to take that breath, right? The breath work that we learn in these, and the restorative ideas. I want you to just buy that 2 seconds before you act, before you enter a system that will be in charge of you forever, right? Because the systems are pushing buttons on purpose, and we absolutely know this, right? We are in a system right now in emergencies, and they're pushing buttons on purpose to get us to react poorly. And using restorative models, I think, is so important in for our hearts, for our communities, for all of us, but especially for children and youth, to really learn how to dismantle that and not enter into systems of oppression, right? They're doing it on purpose. They want you in there because you're easier to control when you're in these systems. So that's why restorative conflict, restorative justice, because it's all relational. It's about feelings. It's about how you relate to this person, and what you can do together, rather than you broke this rule, this is what's happening, and now you're in this system which is going to F you over, right? So that's why it's so, I just love restorative conflict and restorative justice, because it's really giving the freedom to these students, to these people, to especially students of color, to reject sort of these frameworks that they've inherited. And why I think it's so important for us as Unitarian Universalists to really sort of embrace restorative practices, because they just go so well hand in hand with all of the social justice, the anti-racism, anti-oppression, you know, multiculturalism work that we're doing in our denominations, right? It really goes into it marries so well together. We're probably already doing it. To be perfectly blunt, you're probably already doing it. And this just gives terminology and tools, really, in more structured ways in order how to implement them. So that's sort of an overview of sort of the why this is important, particularly to students and youth, and it's been amazing. We've worked with uh, students that have already thrown that punch or done something destructive, right? And they're in the juvenile system, and we've been pretty, knock on wood, successful, right? Like 5 of our students have graduated, and one with an ankle monitor on, and they graduated high school, and they're now in 2-year schools, whether it be trade or community colleges. And they talk about it, and they were like, this, I wasn't supposed to be alive. I was in a gang. This was my life was violence. And by giving them tools, the earlier the better, right? Gives them autonomy and the ability to choose their life and, not be subjected. So, on that note, I think that restorative justice and restorative conflict is so important for us, even here in this room, that uh, Michael and I would like to teach you how to give the perfect apology. And I say this because I have been apologizing wrong for 50 years, incorrectly. Sorry, mom and dad. And, I would say, I'm so sorry for this, and, blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm not going to do it again, and that's our thing. So I'm going to turn it, Michael, can you share our screen? Thank you. So, dun, 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 the perfect apology. There are 5 steps to the perfect apology. 5. What is number 1? What's the first thing you need to do? And please write it in the chat. What is the first thing you need to do when apologizing? Own it. Admit the error. Yes. Good. Good job. Okay. Good. So the first one is you need to say, I'm sorry. Say, I'm sorry. Really easy, right? And then a lot of people were saying accept responsibility, right? Say that you made a mistake. Yes. So what's important about number 2 is I will never forget this moment. My mom was washing dishes and I had done something that made her angry. I know you and I are all very surprised that I made her angry. And I walked in and I thought I was just going to be super cute as usual and be like, I'm so sorry. And she turned around with her hands in the soapy dishwasher and her eyes in flames. And she's like, sorry for what? And I was like, oh, snap. Oh no. So the second one is say what you're sorry for. Okay. Now, Michael, come back to me because I want to see it. I want to see their faces. I want to see faces. Yay. Okay, good. Okay. First 2 down, right? Sorry for what, right? What do you think because there's 5, I will tell you, there's 5 steps to the perfect apology. So what do you think number 3 is? We acknowledge the other person's feelings and name the harm done. That's 1 and 2. Sort of, but you're on the right track with feelings. That's really good. Good job, Tracy. Good job. Teresa, I don't know if we're there yet because if I just say I'm sorry and, I'm sorry for this and I say, what do you need? They're going to be like, I need your head on a platter. And I'd be like, oh, okay, my bad. We're not there yet. Okay. So yes, don't make them comfort you. Okay, great. So Michael, let's go back to the thing. I'm sorry. I'm going to ping pong back and forth. And so number 3 is talk about the feelings, meaning, I know when I was disrespected or made fun of in this way, right? I know what I felt. So I can only imagine what you felt. What were you feeling? Right? What were you feeling in that moment? And giving the person that you're apologizing to the opportunity to talk if they want to. But you also are vulnerable in that moment as well and talk about how in a similar situation, like this came up for you. And I love Anne's thing about Anne in the comments saying, don't make them comfort you, right? Because this is not about you. This is about them and the apology. But we do want to relate and say, yeah, when I got made fun of, it was a terrible feeling. And I can only imagine what you're feeling, you know. Tell me about it. Okay. So number 4. Number 4 is hard. What do you think the 4th step might be? Reparations? Me? No, no, no. What do you think number 4 and number 5? We'll open it. What 4 and 5? What could the, if we're thinking about an apology? Yeah. What do you need to fix this? Plans to not repeat the harm. Yes, good. That's actually number 5 is the future. And that is, how we're going to change in the future to our behavior. So can you put me back to the faces, Michael? Thank you. Okay. How can I make it right? Sort of. Okay, here's the thing. Number 3 and number 4 were the ones that I was always missing, right? Number 1 and 2. I'm sorry for hurting your feelings or whatever, right? And then I would skip to number 5 and say, I'm sorry for hurting your feelings, and I really promise in the future I'm going to do better, right? That wears thin. Wears thin, and people are like, I call BS. That's liar, you lie like a rug. And I'm like, no, I really mean it this time, right? Okay. So with the 3rd one, right, talking about feelings, the 4th one is we need to talk about why the relationship or the person is important to you. And you have to say it. It's going to transform your relationships, I promise. And then the 5th one is going forward, is the future. And I know my parents are taking notes, so maybe other people are too. So I paused. Ha! Okay, so Michael and I are going to sort of go back and forth, and I'm going to apologize 2 ways to Michael. And sort of say, the first one is my old way of apologies, right? My bad. And then the second one is this new restorative conflict way of apologizing. Okay, so Michael, could you unmute, please? Yeah, there we are, together forever. And he's real mad. Do you see that? He's so mad. Whoops. Okay, that's kind of a smile. Okay, act mad. So I know, right? I'm glad I'm 2,000 miles away because you look super fierce. And this is, I was trying to think of something that would be a good, something that we could role play. And this is something that happens a lot in our congregations, right? Where people are misgendered, right? So this is not that far off the mark of what we might have to apologize for. So I'm going to use, the first one is 1, 2, and 5. Michael, I'm really sorry that I misgendered you. And I'm going to really try in the future not to do that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, you just did it again.
What? I did? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
you said he's really mad.
Right? I did. Right? I totally
So
misgendered.
I'm like, are you gonna really try?
Starting now? I am. Right now.
Oh,
Okay.
do I believe you?
Okay, thank you. Okay. So that's the example of the first one.
Listen, you want me to be mad or not?
No, I want you to be mad, but thank you for that example, right? So that was the first one, and how many times in our lives have we done our first that first 1, 2, and 5, and everybody, you can see the other person doesn't believe you. Okay, so here is my apology. I'm going to try and apologize for misgendering you using 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Hey, Michael, I am really sorry for misgendering you. I can only imagine how you feel about this. Is this Is this something that happens to you normally or regularly?
All the time. People don't even bother to read the little pronouns down at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. And
It's,
and I'm
it's like frustrating.
so frustrating. I can only imagine not being seen. And I want you to know that you're so important to me. We do this work together, and you're a person that I deeply care for. You're
Well,
not
you're
only,
important to me too.
Mhm,
I
thank you.
mean, it hurts more coming from someone who's important to me. Like if I didn't care
Absolutely.
about you, I wouldn't care.
Right, right. And that is why I'm so deeply sorry, is because I have hurt you. And our relationship and the love that we have for one another is harmed because I continually misgender you. And that's awful. So in the future going forward, I'm not going to ask for grace. I'm going to really diligently try. I'm going to really try hard
Well, I
not to
appreciate
misgender.
that. And like, are you going to notice when you get it wrong?
Yeah. And in fact, you and I are so close that maybe we could come up with a little term, like to sort of like let me know that I have done
Hmm.
this again, like kumquat or or pineapple. You can just be like, you pineappled me again, and I'd be like, ah! Right, or something. But I am really working hard on changing the system,
Can I
and
get an air horn?
I think that's a little much. But
That's
thank
a
you.
little much.
This
Okay.
may be a little much. Okay, thank you so much, Michael. Good job. Okay, so back to gallery view, so I can see your faces. Yay! So hopefully you can see by that very rough apologies the difference that can be done and the in the relationship, the way you honor the relationship in the second apology in the restorative conflict way, and in the first way it's sort of seen as disingenuous at the best, right? At the worst, and there really isn't space to heal that relationship. Theoretically, if we had had more time, I probably would have asked, I'm like, you know what's the most painful time? Tell me. Like, we could deepen our dialogue together. And that's the entire point of restorative conflict, is that you're deepening the relationship between one another. And it doesn't mean, people think, oh, restorative conflict or restorative justice does not have consequences, right? It actually has more consequences because you take the time to really invest yourself in the relationship and heal it, right? Next time around, when you mess up or you flub up, thankfully there's this established communication, right? Pattern of communication that you have with the other person. But also, you almost feel worse because you've done it again, right? And that piece of accountability and repair is so important, that people tend to work harder on themselves and work harder on the ouches instead of just sort of brushing them off and saying, dang, did I do that again? So we're going to put you into small groups, and because this is a restorative justice and this is relational, I'd like us to go a little deep and think about a person in your own life that you need to apologize to. And it could be a person that is here with us, or it could be a person who has passed away, and you really wish you'd had these tools in order to really deepen that relationship, right? So please go talk with each other. Um, you know, what apology do you need to make using this framework? And why? Yeah. Okay, thanks. So we'll put you into groups and we'll give you about 15 minutes to share. Welcome back. Welcome back. I know we could always use 5 more minutes. We could always use I know that I could have used a lot more time. Um, I think that what I didn't say before going into our breakout rooms, and it was a misstep, so sorry, I apologize for that. I don't have time to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with you, but I do want to just say what I need to say now. Is that it takes a lot of bravery to be this transparent and to do restorative conflict work in relationships. It is not for the faint of heart. And because we are being so transparent with our own feelings and being vulnerable and letting people know just exactly how much they mean to us, and how much their relationship. And because there is that fear, they could say, really, I don't feel this way. I don't feel the same way. Or this really, your friendship or whatever really isn't that important to me, right? It could be devastating. It could be. Um, but I think in the end of the day, I think with that bravery and with that transparency and the desire to deepen that relationship and heal, um, you're doing it for yourself, really, ultimately. Um, and um, there's a lot of power in approaching this restoratively and saying, I really want to work on this. And then having that person say, I don't really want to work on this. And then, with restorative conflict, you then come back and reevaluate and say, I don't think that this relationship, I need to continue this or, whatever. There's a lot of power in walking away too. And you get to decide who you want to be restorative with and who you don't want to be, right? Right. You matter so much to me that I'm willing to be this vulnerable with you. There's a question, Neil.
This this is more a comment on it. You get one thing as you mentioned, sometimes you have to be prepared for the person that you're apologizing to, and want to restore the relationship is going to reject you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had that happen. Matter of fact, in our discussion, I talked about it,
Yeah.
where I made a statement to my daughter because of me having to bail her out financially
Mm-hmm.
in 24 hours. I was able to do it successfully. And my response to her was, don't ever do that to me again. She took it as, don't ever ask me for money.
Right. Right.
Where I meant it is, don't ever put me in a position where I have to bail you out.
Right. Right.
Instantaneous.
Right. But of course, the stress and the adrenaline, and words, you know,
Yeah. So,
words are complicated.
yeah. So this hasn't been restored for nearly 30 years. So it's something I still live with, and I've got 2 children who are trying in the background to see what they can do, but
I
I've got
think,
to accept that as reality. But I've had to accept that as reality, and that is hard to do.
yeah, I think that it's important to recognize, and as we start this work and really start this restorative journey, right, with ourselves and the people that we love, let alone in our congregations, which was the next step for us tonight. But give yourself grace, but really just sort of know that this is a process and the timeline doesn't matter because it's the importance of the relationship. You know, um, in the story that I shared about Tony, about the gang killing, the initiation and the gang killing in the beginning, I think those stories are so important to us, or when we start our own restorative journeys, because we can see the redemption, we can see the power in the forgiveness, and see that these relationships, if this you know, I co-teach with Tony, the person who shot Tarek and killed him, and one of the high school students asked him, when did you start to forgive yourself? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, if the man that I murdered, if his father can come see me in jail, and which he did, and say, I forgive you, then it was at that point that I could start to forgive myself. And his journey took a long time, is still taking time, but it took, a good 20 years, right, to dismantle all the systems and stuff inside. So that's what I just wanted to say, is that it's a lot of bravery. It's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of getting triggered and doing our own, work of, but I'm being vulnerable with you. Why can't you see this, right? Taking those steps back, do the deep breathing, really just, what we're talking about is, in restorative justice or restorative conflict, we're dismantling the active systems that we've inherited, right? Our egos, all of these things that, these boxes that society has handed to us and said, this is your role, right? So we have to dismantle that actively within ourselves as we do this restorative process with another person. So go to therapy. It doesn't have to be done alone, right? This is not a singular thing, which is another white supremacy construct, right? Is the isolation, is doing this just alone. There's teams, there's, covenanting groups, or, in your congregation, or, the small worship teams, or there's lots of people that can help support you in these new ways that you want to move. You don't have to do this alone. And I have relied heavily. Ask Michael. I'm texting him. I'm like, he's like, no, it's okay. I think that's just really important to know. Okay, so we're going to pivot here and sort of thank you so much for being with me on this really personal journey. I think it's important when we talk about restorative conflict to connect with ourselves, right? Because it's not just this academic thing that's happening, right? I think so often we as Unitarian Universalists distance ourselves, right? The head and the heart problem that we seem to have, right? The integration of the two. So thank you for doing this very personal journey in the beginning. And I would like us to pivot and go into small groups again, hopefully different small groups. And I would like there to be one recorder. And in these small groups, we would like you to think about, what were we thinking about? We were thinking about, yes, how do you see restorative conflict working in your community, in the different communities that you inhabit? Basically, like it could work in, how would this look working in a congregation, or in your workplace, right? Or, that type of thing. So, and the school systems, right, with children. So that is in the chat there. And Michael, can you put us into, so one person will report back to the group with just a few ideas, and we can just brainstorm together in these small groups. Welcome back. I always think of the Carter show, welcome back,
Bouncing back and round and go. Here we are, ready to go.
So if we could have the reporter back to us, just raise your hand and we can call on you, and then tell us all the amazing things you talked about. Who would be willing to go for? Okay, Mary. I see Mary LaValle.
Sure. before I forget, because we were just feeding back what we talked about. So we had a couple of examples for my congregation. We have just completed maybe the third or fourth year of our Among course of workshops under Beloved Conversations. And as a result of that, we determined that in our case, it made sense to establish what we're calling a healthy relationships team because we are not comfortable with the term right relationships team. And that involves a lot of the communication styles that are being um, that we're working with now in this group and in this series of work. And I think that it's being successful. We're moving to a governance model of circles and sociocracy, and this gives us a chance to practice working with one another. We've had a couple of examples where it seems to have worked out well, and it's flexible enough where if you need to do more work, we know how to go back and do the work. We have an individual in our group who is a teacher who has used mediation and letting students with her students and getting them to talk to one another about how they feel and what happened. And she feels that that has been successful in that area. And we have another individual who um, has some discussion groups in her congregation. And based on some recent tension, they've decided to restructure the topics of the meeting. For example, um, they were discussing issues of aging, but people wanted to talk about some other stuff too. And so they are now trying out a new structure and they've agreed to try it for a while, but then to review it and to change it if it needs to be changed. Did I characterize that right? My group people?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was me. And I muted myself because I'm like writing notes. Darby, would you like to share? Thank you.
So in our group, we ultimately we didn't find a good answer. The review that we came to is that we don't really see it working yet, but we are hopeful and we are not giving up.
Don't give up. Yeah. Betsy, I see your hand.
Thank you. Um, in our group, we talked about situations we're in our own lives, um, and what seems to work. Will had a one of the things was being in a new job and trying out an idea in a workplace where one was a leader, and trying to bring ideas to people that then received feedback from a manager that one of the people was offended by a part of the presentation. Um, so he was in the difficult position of having to respond to that, but not being able to speak to the person directly because the person wasn't identified. So we talked about the difficulty of indirect, um, and uh, and needing to just transmit the apology through the manager, and also to ask, what can I do? What can I do to make it better? So that felt like a really strong, frustrating, but strong. Another person is working to build relationships in general within a small congregation, and knows that there are a lot of hurts that are historical, have developed over time. So she feels the key is getting people to talk about their feelings, to use the steps, but to focus on the feelings part and the wish for what the relationship can be.
Yeah, that's good.
I was describing the difficulty of trying to plan with a group and feeling like the group is coming from so many different directions that the time isn't used well, and a concrete plan isn't made, and how frustrated it is to me. So I feel that I was impatient in that group, and I need to think about these 5 steps, but maybe with individual people to go back to connect with them. So those were the things we were able to talk about in the time frame.
Great. Thank you. That's really beautiful. Anne, I see.
So we first, one person in our group mentioned that he had been involved in like peacemaking work for 20 years and seeing overlap with the things that we're talking about today. And then another person shared that in their congregation they have a group called the Partners in Covenant group. That's 10 people that meets about once a month, and they go through a process of practicing skills for being skilled people to help when there's a need. So they go through case studies and practicing listening, like I think I heard you say, and skills like that. And we talked about how it takes time, and that some congregations used to, or maybe still do, sometimes have a disruptive person policy, which we're talking about, like how that's a really white supremacy culture, and blaming if a person is bringing up something difficult, blaming them, and not having, and anyway, just like that's classic white supremacy culture approach to conflict versus a generative approach to learning from conflict.
Great. Any more groups to report back? Mary.
Why, some people talked, one person talked about a mentoring relationship, which is, I don't know that it was through the church, but it was through a school, but it was quite beautiful in that faculty or teachers could approach children who thought they may, and they're children from a very uh, low economic level. They don't have, there are not a lot of advantages uh, given to them. And so they would approach children, fast mem uh, and ask them to explain the program and would they be interested. And so that, and then when the children, if this child is interested, that the staff stays supportive, and that they are, that they act as a family, or they get, I don't know, I'm not sure if I've got this right,
Okay.
either acted as
Let
family
me,
or
let
a
me,
family member
let
became
me
interested.
over that, Mary, because
Yes,
I'm the person that brought it up. It's
yes,
an
yes.
organization called Thread, and the volunteers operate as family members. If for young people, generally they start out in 9th grade, and they're followed as a
They stay as, okay.
Fred young person for a total of 10 years.
It sounded very protective, very,
Yeah, and it's working through them to try to, find their way through the labyrinth that we call socialization and becoming a competent person.
okay, very
That
good.
and it's looking at them, treating them as family members and not as
Professional.
with problems.
So forth. Yeah. All right. Thank you. And a lot of the what comments made by other members of our group, and there were particularly interesting in that there were difficulties in some of their groups, that there were some people not careful of time and to express, I think some of the topics were different topics were joys and sorrows, and that this would, and there was thoughts about giving people enough time because this was something very close to them, but other people feeling, well, that's too much time. And And I think that they also, the problem topics, there are, I think someone also said, it was Malice, said there are listening circles, and there are joy and sorrow topics. And again, and then also, again, it's trying to find a time that is suitable for people to be patient with one another. And also, uh, there's also the idea of listening. If they bring up, if people are talking about joys and sorrows, and people bring up events in the outside world, that may become political. There may be people that are grieving in one way for certain things happening, and others are politically opposed to their ideas. And I think that a very nice that and the also was problem of, again, the problem of finding a way, an egalitarian way of running the topics or program. And if there's anyone else that wants to jump in and explain a little in more depth or fully, I'm perfectly willing to give you my time.
I think that's the perfect place for me to jump in. I think as we come to the end of our time together, thank you so much to everybody who's reporting back and all the conversations that we had with such depth and meaning. I'll leave you with a thought, an idea. Once we start talking about restorative conflicts, not only in ourselves but in a system, right? Looking at our systems of our congregations, it really takes the entire congregation in all of its facets and as a whole to really start the same journey together. And it's a really important to have everybody commit to this system of restorative justice and restorative practice, right? From the minister, the office administrator, the music director, right? The committee leads, the religious education area. So we all have the same framework and verbiage, right? So we're talking not at each other, but with each other when conflict does arise, because conflict will always arise. And as we talk about really important things, that are close to our heart, we get agitated. So the importance of working within systems really takes on sort of a multi-layered approach as we work to dismantle our own oppressions within ourselves. Anyway, thank you so much. This was so much fun. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. And yes, there's a third webinar that Michael put into the chat. And thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Allison.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Allison and Michael.
Thank you.
And thank you too, Michael.